Oh, man, I just got done running 10 miles. Now, you may or may not know, but I'm a world-class athlete. I exercise all the time, and therefore I sweat all the time. You may have seen some of the things I sweat on. I sweat on my sharpening stones. I sweat on my work pieces. Ooh, that looks nice. I sweat on my bandsaw. I sweat on my jointer. I sweat on my chickens. Oh, I'm sorry, girl. And last but not least, I sweat on my table saw. So today we're going to figure out how we address this sweat problem. It causes rust on many of my shop items, and we're going to figure out how to fix that today. So let's go take a look. Because of all this sweat, you can see how rusty my table saw is. There's tons of little dots everywhere where my sweat dripped onto the table and it therefore corroded. My jointer's got the same problem. Tons of little droplets where my sweat landed on the jointer and created all sorts of issues with corrosion. Although not as bad, my bandsaw even has a couple of droplets where the rust has gotten into the table. So I've never cleaned any of these surfaces before, so this is a learning experience for me. I want to clean all of that rust off of all of my tables and make sure it looks as good as new. I've watched a few YouTube videos on how to do it, and I want to make sure that they work as good as they say. So it's my understanding that you just need a few simple things to clean that rust off your table and make it look as good as new. This includes some old rags, a Scotch-Brite pad, an orbital sander with 400 grit paper on it, and last but not least, some good old-fashioned WD-40. So first up today, we're going to try to clean the jointer. I'm going to clean one side to make it look as good as new, and I'm going to leave the other side so that you can see a comparison between the before and the after. So let's start the process and see if it works as good as they say. So first off, I'm going to remove the blade guard from the jointer. Next up, I'm going to get my leaf blower and clean off the surface. Now that we have the entire surface exposed, I'm going to liberally spray WD-40 on that surface. Now that we have it coated, I'm going to let it sit for about 5 minutes.
5 minutes later.
Now that we've let this sit for about 5 minutes, I'm going to take my Scotch-Brite pad and see how the rust is removed. Now for doing this for just a short period of time, I'm not that impressed. It is removing some of the rust, however, I'm not seeing a dramatic impact. Now that we've seen the effects of a Scotch-Brite pad, I'm going to spray some more WD-40 on the surface. Now that we have the surface coated, we're going to take our orbital sander with a 400 grit sandpaper and see how it compares to the Scotch-Brite pad. It's right at this moment that I realize there's a night and day difference between the Scotch-Brite pad and the orbital sander with the 400 grit sandpaper. So I continued on with the orbital sander. Once I was done with that, I cleaned the WD-40 off with a rag. It's right about then that I realized you could still see some of my corroded sweat spots. So I decided to repeat the process to see if I could get this surface even cleaner. After sanding, it's time to clean the surface off with a paper towel. So after cleaning it off with a paper towel, I'm realizing I probably need to switch my sanding discs, as I'm not seeing a difference in the results from my first time and the second time around with the 400 grit sandpaper. So I'll repeat the process once more using a new sanding disc. Once again, I cleaned it off with my paper towel and really began to see the shine come through. For good measure, I'm going to do this one more time just to get all those little tiny spots that are still sticking around. Now you can see from the rag that I'm cleaning the WD-40 off that there's a lot of debris that's coming off with each round. And with that, I think we can call it a wrap. So here's a side-by-side comparison of what we had before and what it looks like after we clean the surfaces. Now that we got half of the jointer fixed up, let's move on to the bandsaw. So now that we have a little bit of experience by cleaning the jointer, we're going to move away from the Scotch-Brite pad and strictly use the WD-40 and the orbital sander with the 400 grit sandpaper. First up, we'll remove the fence of the bandsaw. Then we'll remove any lingering sawdust with our leaf blower. After that, it's time to once again coat the surface with our WD-40. We'll let the WD-40 set for about 5 minutes and we'll come back to sand. After we're done sanding, we'll once again remove the debris and the WD-40 from the tabletop surface. And after our first round, this tabletop is already looking great. We'll do one more round of sanding, so we'll start off by spraying our tabletop with WD-40 once again. I make sure that I get all the little spots and nooks and crannies by rubbing the oil in with my fingers. Now for the final cleanup of the WD-40 with my paper towel. And it looks almost as good as new. So last but not least is the table saw. First thing we want to do is to give it a good blow to get rid of any debris.
Michael, that was hilarious.
So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to leave one side in its original form and one side I will clean, just as we did with the jointer. This side right here is the one we're going to clean, and we'll leave the other side in its original form and show the comparison when we're done. So as we've done before, I'm going to spray with WD-40 and rub in all the spots I missed with my fingers. After letting it sit for 5 minutes, I'm going to put a fresh new 400 grit sanding disc on and we'll sand away. After sanding, we'll wipe it down once again with our paper towel. You can see all the debris that's come off of this tabletop. So one thing I noticed is it can be a little difficult to see some of the spots that are on the table when you're sanding. This is because a lot of the debris that's kicked off by the sander will camouflage many of the spots, so it's good to do this process 2 or 3 times. So after we lube it up one last time, we'll do some sanding and get down to the final tabletop surface.
Are you sure you don't want just a dab? It's a lemon essence and it is delightful.
You better take the oil, Leon. It's pretty rough without the oil.
One last wipe down with the paper towel and we'll see what we got. And that looks pretty darn good in my opinion. So here's a side-by-side comparison. This is the surface that we started with. And over on the right hand side, this is what it looks like after we've done the sanding and final cleaning. Now all I have to do is the other side of this table saw and the other side of that jointer over there. All right, well we're almost there. The next thing we want to do is to put some paste wax on the top of these surfaces to prevent future rusting. So that's what we're going to do now. We'll simply apply the paste wax, let it sit for about 15 minutes, and buff it out. So this is the paste wax I use. I think I got it at Woodcraft, but you can buy this at Lowe's, Home Depot, anywhere. I'm just going to lay it on nice and thick. And it's so hot in the shop right now that it's not going to get to really solid state, but it will potentially get there after we let it sit for a while. And there's never too much of this that you can put on. And I'm also going to put it into these miter slots as well to make sure that everything's nice and smooth for when we put our miters in. All right, so that should take care of it on the table saw, and now we'll move on to the jointer. Okay, so in the same fashion, we're going to apply it to the jointer, and we also want to apply it to the fence as well. Now I think the main reason my jointer got so rusty was that I was making some outdoor planters, and the wood that I was using was fairly wet. Therefore, the residue got on the fence especially. All right, I've got that coated, so we'll let that sit for 15 minutes. Now, not as crucial as the other pieces of equipment is the bandsaw. I'm going to apply a little bit here, but since we don't run boards through the bandsaw like we do on the table saw and the jointer, we don't necessarily need this as much. However, it will provide some protection against rust in the future. Okay, so we'll let that sit for 15 minutes. Now that our paste wax is cured, I'm going to rub it off with just simply a paper towel. The more of this you rub off, the smoother it gets and the slicker it gets.
This is a new non-caloric silicone-based kitchen lubricant my company's been working on. It creates a surface 500 times more slippery than any cooking one.
We'll do the same thing at the jointer. If you can believe it or not, I'm already sweating on top of this. And finally, the bandsaw. So last up, since I have it, I'm going to use this slick coat. Now I got this at Woodcraft, and I've used it occasionally, but it says it works better than paste wax. So I'm going to actually spray just a little bit on all of my surfaces just to give it a little bit of added protection. And that will do it. Let's take a look at all of our surfaces and see how they turned out. Now this isn't perfect by any means, but it's a vast improvement of where we were before. And I'm fairly pleased with the outcome. Now I could probably spend a little bit more time by taking some more time to sand and buff and put paste wax on, but this is fine for me. The bandsaw looks great, and so does the jointer. This is a vast improvement for where we were, and I'm really happy with the results. Well, I hope you enjoyed sharing this experience with me. I enjoyed getting my table saw looking almost brand new again. My jointer looks great, and my bandsaw does too. So I'm going to hit the showers, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Well, thanks for joining me today. If you get a chance, I'd love to get your subscription and leave a like. Also, hit that notification bell so you can be notified for upcoming videos. Take care and have a great day.